You're born during the golden age of cowboys, between the 1800s and the early 1900s. There were plenty of states where you could have been born that were famous for cowboys: Texas, Wyoming, Montana, Kansas, and California. Most likely, you'd be born in the middle of absolutely nowhere, in a basic log cabin with no running water, no electricity, and practically nothing inside it. Your family was dirt poor, and even though you were just born, they needed your help immediately. You'd be gathering eggs, feeding animals, and doing household chores from the moment you could walk. There were no schools or playgrounds around, so your entire childhood was spent isolated, working without ever getting to interact with other kids or make any friends. But that wasn't the worst part of being a cowboy in those days. The real danger came from something invisible, something that didn't require guns or courage to kill you. Disease was waiting. Life as a young cowboy meant living in conditions that were practically designed to spread sickness. By the time you turned 6 years old, your chores increased significantly. You'd be collecting firewood, cleaning stables, and doing whatever work your family demanded. You worked all day, regardless of weather. It could be over 100 degrees in the summer, below zero in the winter, or you could find yourself in a tornado or blizzard. It didn't matter. You worked anyway, or you'd get the whip. But what made this truly dangerous was that you were covered in dirt and filth constantly. Your clothes never got properly washed because water was scarce. Your hands were perpetually covered in animal waste and blood from butchering and skinning, and you slept in the same clothes you worked in, night after night, in cramped spaces with other people who were equally filthy. This was the breeding ground for infection, dysentery, and cholera. Your family would drink water from the same sources where animals defecated upstream. Cowboys didn't talk much about these things. It wasn't manly to complain, but they were dying from them constantly. A child who survived to adulthood in these conditions was remarkably lucky. Dust was your constant companion, and it was slowly killing you. Out on the frontier, dust storms weren't just uncomfortable, they were deadly. Imagine riding for hours through a wall of dirt so thick you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. The dust would get into everything: your nose, your mouth, your eyes, your ears. You'd inhale dust with every breath, and it would coat your lungs, settling deep inside like a slow poison. Over time, this caused what they call dust fever, or black lung, a condition where your respiratory system would slowly deteriorate over months and years. You'd develop a chronic cough that wouldn't go away, that would follow you everywhere you went. Some cowboys would cough up blood. Eventually, you'd start spitting up pieces of lung tissue and wouldn't even realize what it was. By the time you were in your 20s, many of your fellow cowboys would be struggling to breathe during simple tasks like walking uphill or throwing a rope. Their skin would turn pale and gray. Their energy would drain away. They'd waste away like ghosts, getting skinnier and weaker with each passing month. And nobody had any real cure for it except to keep working and hope you didn't drop dead during a cattle drive. By age 11 or 12, you were expected to start real ranch work. You'd help herd cattle, round up strays, and tend to horses. This was incredibly dangerous physically, but it was also when you started getting exposed to serious diseases. You'd be handling sick animals without knowing it. Cattle diseases could jump to humans. You might develop a fever from a simple cut that got infected. Tetanus was everywhere. One puncture wound from a nail or a splinter, and you could be dead within days. There were no antibiotics, no real medical treatment. A doctor, if you could even find one, might just tell you to pray. By age 14, you were working full-time as a cowboy, leading cattle across hundreds of miles on journeys that could take months. Sometimes you'd be alone, sometimes with other cowboys. But the conditions were always brutal. You'd ride in the hot sun or freezing cold with almost no time to rest. Your food was terrible, bland, sometimes rotten meat, hard bread, and whatever water you could find. Bad water was a constant source of cholera and dysentery. Many cowboys on these long drives would get sick. Some would die on the trail and just get left there. Their bodies would be buried hastily, sometimes not at all. The dust on these cattle drives was indescribable. Thousands of hooves would kick up clouds so thick that you literally couldn't see the cattle in front of you. You had to trust your horse to find its way through the wall of dust. Your mouth would be completely dry. Your eyes would burn. You'd choke on the dust constantly. The cattle themselves would be kicking up parasites with every step, and those parasites would spread disease. Trichinosis was common from eating undercooked beef. Anthrax could spread from infected cattle. You wouldn't even know you had it at first, just a small bump on your skin. Then it would spread, and within weeks, you'd be dead. The real nightmare was that most cowboys didn't even understand how diseases spread. They thought disease was just bad luck or God's punishment. They had no concept of hygiene or sanitation. By age 17, you were considered a full-time cowboy. And by this point, if you'd made it this far, you'd probably already been sick multiple times. You'd developed some immunity to certain things, but your body was breaking down from constant exposure to harsh conditions and poor nutrition. Many young cowboys died from tuberculosis, which spread easily in the close quarters where they slept. They'd share blankets, breathe the same air in cramped bunkhouses, and the disease would rip through a ranch like wildfire. You'd see strong men cough themselves to death over the course of months. Some would go blind from infections. Some would develop gangrene and need to have limbs amputated, and they'd die from the surgery if not from the infection itself. The food situation kept getting worse the older you got. By the time you were in your 20s, your teeth were probably already failing from poor nutrition and lack of dental care. Scurvy was common because you weren't getting enough fresh vegetables. Your gums would bleed. Your old wounds would reopen. Malnutrition made you vulnerable to every disease that came your way. A simple cold could turn into pneumonia. Pneumonia was a death sentence out on the frontier. You'd develop a fever, your breathing would get worse, and there was literally nothing anyone could do except watch you die. Some cowboys would try to keep working through it, riding all day while essentially drowning in their own lungs. By age 22, you'd learned basically everything you could about being a cowboy, but your body was already showing the wear and tear. If you were lucky, you'd manage to avoid the major diseases. If you weren't, you'd probably be dealing with chronic pain or permanent damage from infections. You'd pack your bags and head west to make your fortune. carrying nothing but the clothes on your back, a pistol with 2 bullets, and maybe a horse if you were fortunate. You'd begin your journey, maybe starting in Wyoming and heading toward California, about 1,200 miles. If you had a good horse, you could travel maybe 20 to 30 miles a day at best. The journey would take weeks, and that meant weeks of exposure to elements, to bad water, to infected wounds. Out on the trail west, the dust would be even worse than on cattle drives. You'd be riding alone mostly, which meant if you got sick, there was nobody to help you. You might develop a fever from contaminated water. Your body would ache. You'd have violent stomach problems. You'd be weak and dehydrated, but you'd have to keep moving because stopping meant death. Mountain lions, wolves, and bears weren't your biggest threat. Your own body was. A simple infection from a blister could become sepsis. You'd develop a limp, then pain, then gangrene. If you were really unlucky, you'd make it to a town where a doctor existed, but frontier doctors were often just as likely to kill you as cure you. They might saw off your leg without proper anesthesia. The infection might have already spread to your blood by then anyway. Even if the amputation worked, you'd probably get an infection from the surgery itself. The outlaws you'd encounter on the road weren't really the worst of it, though they'd certainly add to your suffering. If you got robbed and beaten, the injuries could easily become infected. A broken bone that didn't heal right could leave you permanently damaged, making it even harder to find work. But disease was the real killer. It didn't discriminate. It didn't care if you were brave or fast with a gun. A disease-weakened body couldn't fight off anything else. Your immune system was already compromised from malnutrition and exposure. One more major illness could be the end of you. By age 24 or 25, most cowboys were already showing serious signs of wear. Many of your friends from earlier in your life were probably already dead. They might have died from tuberculosis, from cholera picked up from bad water, from dysentery, from infected wounds, from pneumonia, from yellow fever if they'd ever ventured near swamps. The life expectancy for cowboys was about 35 years old, and that's only if you were lucky enough to avoid the major accidents and violence. Most didn't make it that far. Disease was relentless in the Wild West. Nobody really understood what caused it. There were no vaccines, no antibiotics, no real treatments. Medical knowledge was primitive at best. Doctors might bleed you thinking it would help, or prescribe mercury that would slowly poison you instead of curing you. The dust had probably damaged your lungs permanently by this point. You'd have a chronic cough that wouldn't go away. Physical exertion would leave you gasping for breath. Your body would ache from old injuries that never quite healed properly. You'd have scarring from infections. You might have permanent nerve damage from a disease you'd survived. You'd be constantly vulnerable to getting sick again because your body had been weakened. A simple cold could turn serious. A small cut could become infected. You'd be living on borrowed time at that point, just trying to survive each day without your body completely giving out. The reality of cowboy life wasn't some glamorous adventure. It was a slow descent into physical deterioration brought on by disease, malnutrition, poor hygiene, and constant exposure to harsh, filthy conditions. You were fighting an invisible enemy every single day. An enemy that was far more likely to kill you than any bandit or wild animal. Disease was the dark side of the Wild West that nobody really talked about, but everyone knew was there, killing cowboys quietly, one by one. And that was pretty much it. You'd spend your 20s and early 30s just trying not to die from disease, getting weaker all the time, until eventually something finally got you. Maybe you'd make it to 35 like the statistics suggested. Maybe you wouldn't. There was no glory in it, no grand finale, just a slow fade into nothing. You were born in the middle of nowhere, poor and isolated. You worked yourself to exhaustion your entire life, exposed to every kind of disease and filth imaginable. Your body would break down from constant wear, malnutrition, and infection. And then you'd die, probably far away from anyone who cared about you, with nobody to remember what you'd been through. I guess you could say that was just what it meant to be a cowboy in the Wild West. So, good luck.